Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We get the sources you send us, and we cut right to the core insights. Today, we're diving deep into the mind of, well, a modern football legend, Mohamed Salah.
That's right. We've got some really interesting excerpts from a recent interview he did. It covers his amazing season, his thoughts on things like age, awards, and what he sees for the future.
And our mission, as always, is to use his own words to give you a shortcut to understanding his perspective right now, what makes him tick, and what he thinks is coming next.
Exactly. This isn't just, going over stats you could find anywhere else. It's really about the unique view from someone operating right at the very, very top of the game.
Yeah, we're going to unpack the meaning behind his recent successes, his awards. We'll dig into his personal opinions on player age and, well, how long you can keep going.
And we'll look at his forecasts, too, for himself, for the team, and explore that interesting sort of tension between, individual ambition and what the team needs to achieve.
Okay, then. Let's get into it. Let's unpack this.
Right. Let's start with the big headline from the source material. Salah's just bagged his third Football Writers Association's Footballer of the Year award. That alone is huge. Puts him in some pretty rare company.
Absolutely. I mean, equaling Thierry Henry's record, that tells you something straight away. Premier League, great. But what the interview really stresses is the way he won it, the margin.
Yeah, the source points out he got nearly 90% of the vote, which is, well, it wasn't just a win. It was basically a landslide. They say it's the biggest winning margin this century for that specific award.
Wow. And Salah's own take on that from the interview, what does he say?
He's pretty direct. He just says the vote says everything. What do you think that tells us about how he sees that recognition, his season?
Well, it suggests he feels his performance was just undeniable, right?
Yeah.
Not just to him, but to the writers covering the game constantly. It wasn't even close. And interestingly, he links that individual success right back to the team. He makes the point that the individual stuff, goals, assists, they always help the team in end to win something. He basically argues it's difficult to win the big trophies without players putting up those kinds of numbers.
Right, he's underlining that connection. Individual brilliance isn't just for show, it actually fuels the team's success. Without those top-level stats from key players, winning silverware is just much harder.
But the interview also gets into this interesting kind of duality in how he thinks about success.
Yeah, I saw that. He talks about winning the Premier League being so special, and the individual awards, too, that they feel incredibly rewarding. He says, nothing can match that feeling.
But then almost in the next breath, he sort of pivots. He says, that's what counts in the end, because people look at how many Premier League you won, and that's the most important thing.
That feels really honest, doesn't it? Like, as a player, you obviously savor the personal awards, but you also know, looking at history, looking at the fans, it's the team trophies that really define careers. There's that pull. Exactly. And that tension, personal glory versus collective legacy, every top player deals with that. Salah seems really aware that, yeah, the goals feel amazing, the awards are great, but the team wins are what echo longest.
Okay, so shifting gears a bit, let's talk about age. It always comes up with players like Salah. The source mentions he's 32 and specifically says everyone keeps pointing to that.
It's the standard question, isn't it? Football has this traditional idea about when players peak, but Salah, based on the interview, he offers a really interesting personal analysis. He challenges that idea.
What does he say?
He actually states he believes over the last maybe 5-10 years, players are hitting their peak after 30.
Okay, and his reasoning for that?
He puts it down to a few things. More experience, obviously. Better handling of emotions.
Yeah.
And crucially, players just taking much, much better care of themselves these days. Nutrition, recovery, all of it.
Right.
He feels if you do everything right, you can play until you decide to stop, not some age someone else picks.
That really mirrors what we're seeing across sports, doesn't it? Sports science, data, recovery.
Yeah.
It's changing careers.
Definitely. That old idea of a sharp physical decline is being pushed back, at least for the really dedicated athletes.
So based on that thinking, what's his own forecast? How long does he see himself playing?
He makes a pretty bold prediction, actually. He says he thinks he'll play until 39-40, unless, he adds, his kids tell him it's time to stop.
Wow. 39 or 40. Wow, that's a statement of intent. Especially still playing like he is now.
It shows real belief in his methods, his body, his whole approach.
Okay, so staying at the top, that also involves adapting. There's been a big change to Liverpool, Arne Slot replacing Jurgen Klopp. How does Salah describe navigating that transition? according to the interview.
He says the relationship with Slot and the new staff is very good right from the start. He mentions they're very respectful and work really hard, and it sounds like a two-way street.
How so? What did the early conversations involve?
Well, the source says Slot asked Salah to do specific things tactically, presumably, but Salah also felt he could ask Slot to maybe use him in a different position or situation sometimes. Specifically, he says, to help him provide numbers.
That's fascinating. That's not just taking orders. It's a dialogue about optimization. Player and coach figuring out how to get the best output, those goals and assists.
Exactly. And Salah's personal opinion, he thinks it's worked. He explicitly says he believes Slot has improved him, and he credits that collaboration as part of why his numbers were very high this past season.
That's quite something, isn't it? Giving a new coach credit for actually improving a player already at his level.
Yeah, you don't always hear that. And he's quick to share the credit around, too. He gives half of the credit for his success, the award, to Slot, but the other half for the teammates. Acknowledging they help him get the ball, make the runs, be in the right place, shows that team understanding.
Right. So, looking back at the season itself, does he pinpoint any specific moments? Times when it felt like something special was building?
He does. He mentions 2 games specifically that stuck in his head. Beating Man United away and then beating Brighton at home. He felt those were moments where things clicked, maybe raised the beliefs.
And the single most memorable moment for him.
He names scoring his 200th goal for the club, which happened in the Spurs game, a huge personal milestone. But then almost immediately, he pairs it with winning the Premier League. He says the joy of those things, especially the league title, nothing else could match it.
It keeps coming back to that balance, doesn't it? The individual achievement is massive, but the collective high of winning the league is the ultimate peak.
Yeah, and he talks about the atmosphere around that time, too. The city buzzing and Anfield Road closed. Everyone just desperate for them to win it.
And his relationship with the fans. How does he describe that? Why does he think it's special?
He puts it down to honesty. He says he thinks he's an honest guy, someone who says what he wants straight away and doesn't hide stuff. His take is, that's why they love me.
Authenticity. Fans respond to that.
And he also makes this statement about the club's identity, that Liverpool has to be always, never be underdog, always has to be there fighting for trophies. That's pure Liverpool mentality, right? It aligns perfectly with the fans' view.
Definitely. Okay, looking forward then. The interview touches on a time when his future maybe wasn't set in stone. He admits he thought about potentially leaving.
Yes, he does. He says he considered it, partly because, as he puts it, clubs sometimes deal with players after 31 different way. It brings us back to that age thing again. He was aware his age might become a factor.
So it wasn't absolutely certain he'd stay?
According to him, no, it wasn't 100% clear, but he decided to just enjoy it and sort of see what's going to happen end of the season.
And now, clearly, he's looking ahead.
Okay.
Over 400 appearances now. And the interview mentions specific targets he had right up to the very last game.
Absolutely. He'd already broken one Premier League goal involvements record, the one for 30 games, and he was totally focused on trying to break the overall record in that final match. Needed 2 more goals or assists, I think. He was fully focused in the last game trying to hit that mark. That tells you about his drive.
So beyond that single game stat chasing, what about next season and bigger picture ambitions?
For next year, he mentions trying to break that goal involvement record again. Team-wise, winning the Premier League is always a target, but he makes a really notable statement. My priority will be more in Champions League.
Oh, interesting. A definite shift in emphasis there towards Europe.
Seems like it. And then there's the ultimate individual prize.
The Ballon d'Or.
Yeah. He talks about his chances. He feels he's never had a season like this, calls it a crazy year, crazy season with the trophy. His personal assessment is that this gives him his best chance to get it right now.
Okay, so let's try and pull all this together. What this deep dive into Salah's own words really gives us is, well, a complex picture. He's incredibly driven, yes, by stats and individual awards, but also deeply connected to team success.
Right. And he holds this strong, maybe unconventional view on player longevity, believing peaks can come later. He seems adaptable, analytical about working with new coaches like Slot.
And he has these very clear, very ambitious goals, both short-term, like those records, and long-term legacy things. With that interesting new focus maybe on the Champions League and the Ballon d'Or.
It really offers you, the listener, a fascinating look into the mindset you need to stay at that elite level for so long. And it also it highlights how players and clubs might need to rethink those old timelines about performance and age. Things are changing.
which leads us nicely to our final provocative thought for you to chew on. Given Salah's strong belief that top players can excel well into their late 30s, given his adaptability, and his stated shift towards maybe prioritizing the Champions League and the Ballon d'Or, what does that mean strategically for big clubs?
Yeah, how should they plan? Is that traditional idea of moving players on around 30 still the right way? Or does a player like Salah, performing like this and thinking like this, force clubs to consider a different kind of long-term investment in their aging superstars? Something to think about.